In a quaint coastal bookstore in Newport, Oregon, a couple laughed softly, their hands brushing as they stacked books under the glow of fairy lights. To the world, they were Emma and James, a charming pair running pages by the sea. But 10 years ago, they were Clara and Ethan, stepmother and stepson, who vanished from a mountain trail, leaving David, a devoted husband and father, to drown in grief and whiskey. For a decade, he believed they were dead, spending every penny, every tear, searching for them. Until one shattering phone call revealed the unthinkable. Clara and Ethan hadn't been kidnapped or killed. They'd run away together, living as lovers, betraying David in a way that would break any heart. This is the story of a man's descent into despair, his fight for redemption, and the truth that nearly destroyed him. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, where we unravel the most jaw-dropping true-life stories. If you're hooked already, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment with where you're watching from. Your support keeps these tales alive. Now let's dive into the heart-wrenching saga of David, Clara, and Ethan. A tale of love, loss, and a betrayal so shocking it'll stay with you long after this video ends. David's life was a picture of contentment before the fall. At 45, he'd found Clara, a 42-year-old graphic designer whose infectious laugh could brighten the gloomiest day. Her green eyes sparkled with adventure, and her warmth drew David in like a moth to a flame. Clara wasn't just his wife. She was the glue that held their small family together. Ethan, David's 19-year-old son from a previous marriage, had been a quiet, guarded kid when Clara entered their lives. She was patient, teaching him to love the outdoors, guiding him through hikes in the Cascade Mountains, and earning the title of Mom through years of care. David, a high school history teacher, felt like he'd hit the jackpot. A loving wife, a son finding his way, and a home filled with laughter. On that fateful autumn day in 2015, Clara and Ethan set out for the Eagle Crest Trail, a rugged path they'd hiked before. David was at a teaching conference in Seattle, smiling at a photo Clara texted from the trailhead, both of them grinning, backpacks on, ready for a day in the wild. "See you tonight, love you," her message read. David tucked his phone away, unaware those would be her last words to him. When they didn't return by evening, worry gnawed at his gut. He called Clara's phone, then Ethan's, each unanswered ring tightening the knot in his chest. By midnight, he was at the police station, his voice trembling as he filed a missing persons report. The search was relentless. Volunteers scoured the Cascades, helicopters buzzed overhead, and dogs sniffed for any trace of Clara and Ethan. Flyers with their faces plastered every corner of town, but weeks passed with no leads. The police floated theories, a bear attack, a fall, or even a kidnapping, but nothing stuck. David rejected the idea they'd run away. Clara loved him fiercely. Ethan was his son, his blood. They wouldn't just vanish. Yet as months turned into years, hope faded. David's world crumbled, and he fell into a darkness he couldn't escape. Grief became David's prison. He sold their house to fund private investigators, draining his savings on dead-end leads. He hiked the Eagle Crest Trail himself, shouting Clara and Ethan's names until his voice gave out. At night, whiskey dulled the pain, its burn a poor substitute for the warmth of his lost family. His teaching job slipped away. Students' pitying glances were too much to bear. Friends tried to help, but David was adrift, haunted by nightmares of Clara and Ethan calling for him. The bottle became his only solace, a cruel companion in a life stripped of meaning. By 2023, David was a shadow of himself. His once strong frame was gaunt, his eyes hollow from years of loss. He lived in a cramped apartment, the walls closing in with memories of what was. But a friend's persistence pulled him to an AA meeting, and something clicked. David, tired of drowning, grabbed sobriety like a lifeline. It was a brutal fight, every day a battle against the urge to drink, but he clawed his way to 1 year sober by 2025. He found purpose at a community center, helping others rebuild their lives. For the first time in a decade, David glimpsed a future beyond his pain. Then came the call that would upend everything. It was June 2025, a warm evening that felt like any other. David's phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. The voice belonged to Tom, a private investigator he'd hired years ago. a man who'd never stopped digging. "David," Tom said, his voice tight. "I found them. They're alive." David's heart lurched. Alive? After 10 years? His mind raced with images of Clara and Ethan, lost in some remote wilderness, waiting for rescue. But Tom's next words were a knife to the soul. "They're in Newport, Oregon, living together, as a couple." The world tilted. David dropped the phone, his breath coming in jagged gasps. A couple? Clara and Ethan? His wife and his son? It was a sick joke, a nightmare he couldn't wake from. But Tom's voice was steady, clinical. He'd tracked them to a coastal town, where they lived as Emma and James, running a bookstore called Pages by the Sea. They'd bought a house, built a life, and passed themselves off as husband and wife. Tom sent photos. Clara, her hair now blonde but her face unmistakable, laughing at a farmer's market. Ethan, 29 now, his features sharper but his eyes the same. They looked happy. In love. David retched, the betrayal sinking into his bones like poison. He drove to Newport the next day, his hands shaking on the wheel. The town was idyllic, all salt air and pastel storefronts. The bookstore sat on a quiet street, its windows warm with light. David stood across the road watching. There was Clara, arranging books with a smile. Ethan was behind the counter, handing her a coffee, their fingers brushing in a way that screamed intimacy. David's knees buckled. This wasn't a mistake. This was their choice. A life built on his pain. He didn't storm in. He couldn't. Instead, he sat in his car and sobbed, the weight of a decade crashing down. He'd spent everything, his savings, his health, his soul, searching for them, believing they were victims, but they'd run away, planned it, left him to rot in grief while they played house. David thought of the nights he'd prayed for their safety, the days he'd sold his possessions to chase leads, the years he'd drowned in alcohol to escape the void, all for nothing. Clara, the woman he'd loved for 7 years, had taken his son and turned his life into a lie. Ethan, his own blood, had stabbed him in a way no enemy could. Back home, David unraveled. The whiskey bottle he bought stared at him from the kitchen table, its amber glow a siren's call. He didn't drink, not yet, but its presence was a test. He called Tom, demanding answers. How long had they been together? When did it start? Tom's findings were sparse but damning. Clara and Ethan had left the trail in 2015, not lost but fleeing. They'd rented a car under false names, disappeared, and built a new life. Why? No one knew. No note, no clue, just a betrayal that cut deeper than any loss. David's mind churned with questions. Had Clara always seen Ethan as more than a stepson? Had their hikes, their closeness, been a facade? Or had something twisted on that trail, something that warped their bond into this? The not knowing was torture. He imagined confronting them, screaming his pain into their faces. He pictured Clara's excuses, Ethan's silence. But what would it change? They'd chosen each other, erased him without a backward glance. The whiskey bottle loomed, but David fought back. He returned to AA, his voice breaking as he told the group, "They didn't just leave me, they erased me." Strangers became his anchor, their own scars mirroring his. They reminded him of the man he'd become in sobriety. Resilient, worthy of more than this betrayal. One night, David drove back to Newport, not to confront but to let go. He watched Clara and Ethan through the bookstore window, their ease a stark contrast to his scars. His heart ached, but a quiet strength stirred. They'd taken 10 years, but he wouldn't let them take the rest. He poured the whiskey down the sink, the act a defiant reclaiming of his life. David leaned into his work at the community center, finding purpose in others' healing. He joined a grief counseling course, not just to understand his pain but to help others navigate theirs. Months later, he wrote a letter he'd never send. "I loved you both," he scrawled, "but I'm done carrying your ghosts." He sealed it, tucked it away, and stepped outside. The Cascade stood in the distance, no longer a tomb but a testament to his survival. David wasn't whole, but he was rebuilding. And that was enough. If this story of betrayal and resilience gripped you, please hit that subscribe button and join our community of storytellers. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think of David's journey, or where you're watching from. Your support fuels these tales, and I can't wait to share more with you. Stay strong, keep watching, and I'll see you in the next video.